questionable. You have the Yanava from Genoa. How do you pronounce it? Genoa? Yeah. So that's the Yanava Esrogim.
Oh, I didn't do it.
Those are in Italy.
Staple in Eastern Europe.
You have the Calabrians from the foot of the Italy, also the bottom there. You have the Corsica, you have the Moroccan, which we know about. You have the Yemen, Taimani. You have from Greece. You have different places in Europe where they used to get it. Parga in Greece. Now, today it changed. Today we don't have really, most of Esrogim we get come from Eretz Yisrael. Okay? You still have Taimanim and Moroccan. A lot of Taimanim are replanted, a lot of Moroccans are replanted, a lot of the Yanavas are replanted in Eretz Yisrael and Kfar Chabad, and a lot of the different kinds were replanted. But the question is, where is the Messiah? How do we know where these Esrogim are coming from? So the Chassam Sofer says you could only take a Yanava or something similar to that, where you know what the Yidden were using all the years. You know where they were coming from. You know these Esrogim. You know what was happening. So the Yanava Esrog. Okay, he has a picture of a Yanava Esrog. I'm sure you also Yanava Esrogim. Actually, it looks a little different. It's a pretty decent picture, but it's the Yanava Esrogim had a very good Messiah in Europe. People used to use it all the time. The problem with it, why many literature don't necessarily use it, even though it always had a very good Messiah, is because from the World Wars, starting World War I to World War II, there was no real hashgacha on it. Well, some claim there was, some claim there wasn't, but that's where the questions come in. And again, since it was a very big market, because they used it for fragrance and things, so there's always a chashash that they, will market it. They put things in there which would make it not necessarily kosher. So the question is, did it lose its Messiah during that period of time until after the Second World War? Now that's the debate on that. But aside for that, it dates back pretty far, the Yanava Esrogim. You also have...
Genetically, though, today they can't... There's no way of knowing.
So genetically, you can't really know. And the truth is, genetically, you'll find a lemon in every esrog because the bees pollinate and things like that. And that's sort of allowed. So it's very hard to tell genetically. Unless today they have better testing, but there's no questions if we would rely on that anyways. What's common today is what we have is called Badatz Esrogim. What's Badatz Esrogim? Badatz just means it has a hechsher of the Badatz in Eretz Yisrael. These are Eretz Yisrael, the Esrogim. Okay? While the Yanava Esrogim, many of them have, today it also changed. A lot of the Esrogim which never used to have a pitim, and it used to be a trademark of a good kosher esrog, that shows that it's not a merkavus if it doesn't have a pitim. And the reason is because we said before, the esrog trees are weak. So what happens is the first thing to grow on the tree is the pitim. Let's see if there's a picture of it. The first thing to come out is a pitim. It starts budding. And then as the esrog grows, the pitim falls off. But the stronger the tree is, the more they can hold on to the pitim and it stays on. So the trees that were not merkav, that were not grafted, they sort of lost their pitim earlier. So it used to be a trademark of a kosher esrog is not to have a pitim. Okay, we'll have to discuss how you know if the pitim fell off before or after. We'll get to that. But that was a trademark. Now today it's not like that anymore, because today even the Chazon Ish Esrogim are starting to have pitims, because they're stronger, they're trees, they know how to deal with them better, and they really work with the things. So even the ones, the same esrog that used to not have a pitim, now have pitims.
Did they wait till they fall off, or they pick them?
What?
The esrog?
No, they picked them.
They picked them?
Yeah.
So then the pitums still
No, it falls off right in the beginning. Some of them fall off right when they start growing, yes.
Isn't that that's not what's keeping it attached?
After the
No, the pitim is on the
end.
other side. So, look, this side's keeping it
Oh,
attached.
really? I always thought it was a
Yeah.
pitum.
No.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
now you're going to ask like this. We hold the esrog this way when we make a
Pitim is the
bracha.
Yeah.
pistil.
Right? We hold the esrog this way because it actually grows on a tree facing upwards.
Really?
Until it gets heavy and it starts facing sort of a little
Very
down.
interesting.
but it grows like this. You can even see grows like this, going up. But what happens is that it gets heavy and it starts falling from the weight of the esrog.
That's probably when they pick it.
Can we go back a bit further, though? I mean, Torah says pre-Eitz Hadar.
Right.
So, who came up with this? I mean, what's the makor that it's dafka this, and if it's dafka this, and it smells like it, and it looks like it, and it, I mean, so then it should be okay. I mean,
even if it's grafted,
pre-Eitz
I
Hadar.
don't get it. A guy comes along and grafts the esrog with a wild orange or something, okay, and it looks like an esrog. That makes it kosher. It's still grafted. We know it's grafted. I saw him graft it, right? So it doesn't help. Now, the Chassam Sofer does say, that's what I was saying, the main, he brings from the Kappas tomorrow, I think, he says that the main siman of esrog, like we mentioned, that most of the flesh is white inside. And he says, because the Gemara says, one of the simanim of esrog is, that's tam eitzoi katam period katam eitzoi. The eitz tastes like the tree. The fruit tastes like the tree, right? That's the esrog.
No, it doesn't have much of a taste, basically.
No, it tastes like the tree. It has the same taste as the tree. So he says that a lemon also, if you eat the peel, it tastes like the tree. Okay, I don't know if that's true, but that's what he says. So he says, yeah, but the difference is most of the lemon is the pulp. And that doesn't have the same taste as the tree. I think the esrog, most of the esrog, the basra esrog is actually that white stuff which goes all the way to l'chedra azera. So that's hazardin. Does taste like a tree. So he says that's what defines an esrog. What actually defines an esrog as an esrog is the white part inside.
So where did the esrogim come from way back when? I mean, they probably didn't come from Italy during the time of the first base of English. I guess they learned that.
So you have to know. You have to know. So the question is like this. So where does the esrogim come from? So let's go back. So the Yanava they've been using for years. Now the Badatz ones. Okay, it's really originated from a fellow by Ordang. What happened was like this: the claim, it's not so clear where it came from. So the claim is like this: the claim is that one version at least claims that Sir Moses Montefiore planted an esrog tree because he wanted to transplant him from Corsica. Transplanting from them, he planted the tree in order to make the Teshrav Esrogim in Eretz Yisrael, and so, they should be able to do a little bit of esrog. And he planted the tree. It didn't really go anywhere, that tree. But a few years later, from all these wild trees that were growing from the trees he planted, Rabbi Ordang came, and he cultivated these trees under the supervision of the Badatz. Some claim these not from him; these go back further from him, from the time of the Beis Yosef. We'll see many Esrogim that I saw all have the claim that they go back to the time of the Beis Yosef. We'll see that soon, but that's what they claim. And basically, they took these wild esrog trees that they assumed that weren't grafted at all because they were wild, and they used it. But perhaps it came from somewhere from where Sir Moses Montefiore got it from, or who knows if that was grafted. So therefore, the Badatz doesn't really have that kind of Messiah. So the regular esrog, it's kosher, but in those that are looking for like the Chassam Sofer writes, we said before that a Messiah like a bird has, we'll have a hard time using it. Now, the Badatz does have a very nice looking esrog. Like for example, this would be a Badatz esrog. It looks very nice. It has the bumps and it comes up and right shape and all that. So it has a pitim. For the point is, if a Badatz esrog doesn't have a pitim, I would be very concerned that perhaps the pitim fell off afterwards, because they usually come with pitims. Okay. Again, we'll discuss exactly how you see when it came off, but these kind of esrogim always have pitims. Now, the Chazon Ish came around and he decided that in Eretz Yisrael it was like the Wild West in this time, the early 1950s, and people were being markiv and selling and trying to get their esrog sellable and marketable, and they were doing all kinds of shtick to get the esrog to be a healthy looking esrog. Therefore he wanted to find an esrog that he could be yotze the Dalam Minim. Now one thing we'll never be able to is fathom the mind of the Chazon Ish. Okay, he was one of these geniuses that wrote a diagram for someone to do brain surgery, right? He understood nature and everything. So he set out, he wanted to make sure that there was kosher esrogim for people to use. So at the time, I'm quoting from the Sefer, at the time there was trees growing near Shechem. Okay? They weren't really in Shechem. There was a place called, is it over here? Oim El Pacham. Fam. I don't know, it's Fam, you know what it is?
Fam, yeah.
Fam.
Big Arab village.
Yeah. So that area actually has a Messiah that's where, it doesn't have Messiah, the Chuvas place can talk about it actually. They used to get esrogim they saw back in the time of Beis Yosef. And after that, that was a place where the esrogim came from. The old esrogim they saw came from that place. So here we have a link to a Messiah here. There was an old place where that's where esrogim came from. Now this is, so first he went to, that's near Shechem, but first he went near Shechem and he checked out the trees and he spoke with different experts in the field, and based on his investigations he decided he understood how to distinguish between a tree that's murkav and a tree that's not murkav, and he picked out a tree and he used that. Okay? Then, a year later, he learned that there are new ways of grafting trees. Therefore, he decided that the esrogim he used last year is not 100% yet, not good enough. So he went back to find a new place to get esrogim. So this was a place near Shechem, which had an area which Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin actually had esrogim that were distributed, something called a Braverman esrog. I don't know if you ever heard that, a Braverman esrog. So that comes from his Talmud, of Zerach Braverman, from Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin, and that's from the area where he used his esrogim. And the Chazon Ish went there and selected some esrogim from that area, which he felt were not considered murkav. And he took that, what?
What's murkav?
Murkav is grafted, that has no other fruits in it at all. And he took one of these esrogim, and he gave it to Rav Michal Yehuda Lefkowitz, Zatzal, Shimon Panovich, and he said, plant it in your street in Bnei Brak, okay? We mentioned last year, this is one of the miracles of all time. There's a picture of the tree here. He actually planted the tree, and that tree...
He planted the esrog?
He planted the esrog, he planted the seeds, yeah. He planted the esrog. Rosh Hashiva had no idea what a tree looks like, you know what I mean? And he planted the esrog, and he has a tree. There's a tree in this is the world famous Lefkowitz trees over here, sort of a picture of it, Lefkowitz trees. This tree went for years and years and years, 50 years, longer than most trees last, and the esrogim were coming out galore. Had the bracha of the Chazon Ish, and many esrogim came out, healthy esrogim, big, huge esrogim, and the tree died after he was nifter of Michal Yehuda Lefkowitz last year, a few years ago. He was nifter, that's when the tree ended. So it was like one of these bizarre things that happened, and from that tree they planted many different pardesim. So that's called the Lefkowitz esrog, and it comes from there where Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin's esrogim came from, where he felt the Chazon Ish's understanding of an esrog, in the studying of the subject, he felt that these weren't murkav, and he put it aside. Now, after that, the next year, or a couple of years later, he decided to travel again to look for esrog, and he went with his attendant, Rav Nochem Yoel Halpern, and on the way, he passed this place of Fam, which the esrogim will date back all the way from Beis Yosef, like we mentioned before. And he felt that he found the tree there, and he said, this is a real esrog. He liked this even better. And he gave this to take seeds and plant it on Rehov Marshal. So this is the Halpern tree. Okay, there's a picture of it. The Halpern tree didn't have the same success as the Lefkowitz tree, But it did make esrogim nonetheless, and many esrogim were made from that tree.
Is that the flower?
Yeah, that's the flower before.
That's something our friend there should understand, that these start off as flowers,
So the flowers, yeah. And then it goes down. Yeah.
but they start off as, little flowers.
Right, and then the flowers fall apart.
And
you
then
get
the top of it, as you mentioned, the pistil stays, and then the bottom, it's almost like the flower gets pregnant. It's bigger
There's a
and
picture
bigger.
of the halpern tree that's on the. These old little b'nai brak in someone's back in the front yard. So halpern tree, and it doesn't have as many esrogim, and it's not as rich, but it made esrogim. And those are the halpern esrogim. These are all chazanish esrogim. Chazanish esrogim don't look like this. I should have brought one. I have one at home. It looks a little bit like, many of them are green and they're funny shapes. Some look like bananas. Some like, I see some pictures of them.
Those look funny shaped.
Yeah, let's say something like this sometimes, or you get, yes, this would be a classical esrig. I don't know if you can see it, the classical Lefkowitz esrig. It has like a nose coming out of the top, a nose coming out of the esrig on top. It's just shaped interesting, and again, this was a trademark of having a non-Murkav esrig. I say you're not going to get one that looks, if you get a beautiful esrig looking like this, the real yeshiva guys will say, that's not an esrig, that's not an esrig. But that's the Chazanish's esrogim. Now, the other more classical esrogim you have, okay, so from the Chazanish, it's important to distinguish. You have the Chazanish and you have Zon Chazanish. Chazanish means the ones that he actually either used or gave to a student to plant that tree. The Zon Chazanish is from that Pardes. They claim they got it from the same area the Chazanish got it from. It has less authenticity. Okay, now you have different kind of varieties from each one. Now you have the Teimani esrog, which we mentioned before. The Teimani esrog is pretty much all white on the inside. It's been the Teimanim had this esrogim for years. Also, it goes way back. At the time, the Chazanish had felt that they don't have any simon of Murkav. He felt they were very strongly considered authentic, and people try to go get a Teimani esrog. It's not such a large market, so it's harder to get. But at one point, the Chazanish changed his mind, and he felt that someone showed him that you could graft it with a different kind of fruit. I forget what it's called. A different kind of fruit that you could graft it with. And when he saw that could be done, he stopped using the Teimani. So the Teimani had its ups and downs, so to say. There's some places that don't use it. Now you have the other kind of esrog you have is the Moroccan esrog. We all know what a Moroccan esrog is. This is a sort of a picture of it. The Moroccan esrog. Moroccan esrog is smoother. Sometimes they have very little bumps, if none at all. It doesn't really go on a slope to the top. It sort of goes to the top and then this goes in. Sometimes it's hard to tell which is the top or the bottom of a Moroccan esrog. They have a great gartel in the middle, right? The Moroccan esrogim are two bumps on the side with a gartel in the middle. So Moroccan esrogim in Morocco, they've been using it for many, many years.
They're really big, aren't they?
No, Moroccans are very small,
No.
actually. The
Oh,
Teimani
okay.
is big.
Okay.
Teimani comes big. Moroccans are small usually. But the Moroccan esrogim, a big debate on them. Some hold they're very good, because the Moroccans have always used them. And they were talked about in the Paiskim. And some hold that, again, they were not really watched properly over all the years. And therefore, they're, first of all, they don't look like the classical of the other esrogim. Necessarily, they don't necessarily have the look of all the other esrogim you see around. They look a little different. Obviously, it's the place where they're planted which gives it the look. So it could be that's the way they grow in Morocco, but it doesn't have the same look. Mitzad Sheni, also it hasn't been watched properly. There were times when it wasn't necessarily. You don't know who was tending it, and perhaps it was Murkav. Now, they do have places where they claim they go and they find these wild areas of esrogim tree growing, and they say, well, it hasn't been touched by anyone, and therefore these must be, this must be a place where nobody ever touched it. It's been like this since, Sheshis Mebreshis, and therefore they make and they sell, Yifrach used to sell these Moroccan esrogim. He goes out there by donkey and this, and then nobody goes there. It's hard to know these things because maybe it's growing wild, but perhaps 100 years ago there were people that were planting it not wild, and then you have this issue. So this is the basic breakdown of today's esrogim. Today's esrogim you have basically 5 times. You have the Yanavas, right, which we discussed. You have the Eretz Yisrael ones, the general Eretz Yisrael ones, and then you have the Chazanish with all its branches of different types of Chazanishes, and then you have the Taimani, and you have the Moroccan. People used to try to be machma to get different types of esrogim because you can never know which is the real, which is 100% pure strained esrog, and therefore you would take many different esrogim. But to take many different esrogim like this one and this one has no point because they're all coming from the same place. You would take one Moroccan, one Taimani, one Yanav, one this and that, and you hope that you got one that was pretty kosher. But that's the
But they would make a bracha on one and there's just shake the other 4?
Yeah. So the question comes like this. This was the question. So you have a chazanish esrig, or that looks like a banana, and you have a esrig, the badat esrig that looks beautiful. So which one do you make your bracha on? Okay, do you make your bracha on the beautiful? Right, you get one chance to do the mitzvah. I mean, we hold esrig a whole day. You get one chance to do the mitzvah, right? So the what's his name? The Chalkas Yayev says, make a bracha on the one that's for sure kosher. Make a bracha on your one that you hold is for sure not mokev. Whether you got the Yanav or you got the Chazanish or the Taimah, you make your bracha on that one, even though it doesn't look so nice, and then so then afterwards you take the other one. Because Anshi Yerushalayim used to hold esrog the whole day, so you mamshich continue the mitzvah, but you want to make the bracha on the one that's the most chance of being kosher. I say from Chaim Brisker the other way around, because once you did your mitzvah once, afterwards you're shaking, you're not doing the mitzvah anymore. You already did the mitzvah. You get one chance of doing the mitzvah. So better make the bracha on the nice esrog, that's a suffix, and this way you. In case it's kosher, you did a mitzvah muhuda, and then take the other esrog, which is for sure kosher. So just in case the other one wasn't kosher, you did this, and it's not considered a hefsek. It's not considered a hefsek by taking the other one first. That's machlok bakaponim. This is where you get people taking different kinds of things. Now. The B'kur Yaakov held that most esrogim today are not morkav. You don't have to be concerned with it unless you really have a chashash. You can be samech on it. So this is the 2 schools of thoughts in buying esrogim. There are those that will look for a specific type of esrog and not be so concerned with how it looks because they want to better get an esrog than get a nice lemon. And there are others that will look for the. Will say no. We assume everything is good. And Shalom Yisrael, and we'll just look for the nice esrog.
I might have missed this, but how did the Chazanish esrogim survive if that tree died? I mean, what did they replanted it elsewhere?
The tree died a couple of years ago. By over the 50 years, they took the esrogim from that tree and they made whole orchards.
So the Kailos esrogim come from where? They're Moroccan esrogim, or
most of them are regular badats. Well, they're missing Karel. It's esrogim. We have a few. We have about 20, 30 Chazanish ones.
All you need is the seeds.
They have been replanted in California and other places in Mexico. They replanted it, but you have to know where they originated from, and you also have to know who's doing it, how trustworthy is the fellow that's replanting the esrogim. Because the guy wants to make business. It's big Yetzirah. He wants to make money. He can lose a lot of money on the business because if the esrogim don't come out good, he lost a lot of money. If they come out good, they can make a lot of money. So
it sounds like, though, that just from the simple shot, that the ikra seems to be it has to be a nice looking fruit. It's got the way the esrog looks is certainly important in this particular.
Right, but we were discussing the first question: is what's an esrog? Right, you can have a nice looking chicken, but you can't eat it. Right, you have to make sure that it's that's some type of rice. Just like
nice looking
You've been dating the wrong girls.
All right.
So that's the, it's like a din oiftar, the nechel b'masaris, that's what we're saying. That's what it's like a din oiftar, you have masaris, you have to have masaris where it comes from. So that's the background of the esrogim that we have here today. Now, discussing the pitim, how do you know when the pitim fell off? What's the deal with the pitim? Here's a pitim that looks like it's a little burnt underneath. Should have brought the other esrogim out at home. Like we mentioned earlier, the first thing to grow on the tree is actually a pitim. Here, you have a picture, I'll pass it around. You have a flower, and then you could see the esrog growing in the beginning, but this is actually a pitim growing. Okay, the top picture, we'll pass it around. You could see that it grows as a pitim, and then the back side starts growing out, and then the pitim falls off. So you're in the middle of the flower falls away, and then you have the esrog starting to grow.
That's fascinating.
That's the pistol, though.
I don't know, let me see.
Yeah.
It is, right?
That's what?
It's called the pistol. Remember that.
It's the male part of the plant.
That's right.
And then around there are things called stamens.
Actually,
Stand
the pistol's the
right.
female part of it.
No problem.
Otherwise, I'll be fixing some other kind of pistol.
That's right, the stamen
You just put that on.
produces
You
the
just,
pollen.
you just recorded that.
The pollen goes onto the pistol. Right?
Should we give your name and address now?
Stamen produces the pollen, and it goes onto the pistil, which then goes down into the...
And they end up with a pregnant pistol.
So what happens is, as the esrog grows, it starts drying up, and the pitim falls off. So there's a big debate in the poskim. What's the status of the esrog? That's supposed to have a pitim. If the pitim is off, it's chassid, it's missing. It's not harder. It's hard, not harder, chassid. So the poskim say, if it falls off in the early stages, before the esrog really grew to be a fruit proper, that's for sure kosher. So, way to tell that is, if it has a dark black or brownish hole, like a hole where the pitim is, you find some esrogim, like a little hole, it goes indentation, it goes down, that's a sign that it fell off pretty in the early stages. Okay? That's the best kind of non-pitim esrogim. Okay? And if there's a picture of that, the picture of that would be pictures of pitimless esrogim. I have a good one, I'm not sure. But the ones that intend to go in, that's a good sign that it grew without the pitim. You can have on the same tree esrogim that have pitim, and esrogim that don't have pitim. Oh, this broke afterwards. This is
No, because I saw the scarring around it. I thought.
Now, some esrogim have, you'll see by the pitim, almost like a double edge. First there's an outside rim around, and then there's a little piece on the inside. That's also a sign, like if you see this pitim is going to fall off eventually, you see the black around because it dries up. When things fall off naturally, they fall off very smoothly. When they fall off unnaturally, it's rough. So if you see, sometimes the esrog has like a ring around it. Sometimes indentation on the outside, like you'll see in this picture, and sometimes on the inside here. Yeah. This you see a ring around the edge, on the inside. This is very common. Look at this picture, and you can look at this picture. It has a ring around the outside. This has a ring around on the inside of it, not all the inside, along the edges, but it sort of dents in. That's a sign that it fell off during growth. While the esrog was growing, it fell off. It dried up, and then it fell off. So, it's also kosher with machshava today, with machshava those esrogim. It's also kosher, it's very, very common. And those that don't use an esrog with a pitim rely on that, because even though there are some places that say that once the esrog reached a certain maturity of an esrog, it's large enough to be considered a fruit, if the pitum falls off, even if it's attached to the tree, it could be its puzzle. There are others that maintain that no, as long as it's still growing, it's kosher, it falls off naturally, until it actually is a complete grown, full-grown esrig. Then, if it comes off, even if it's on the tree, it could be problematic. And usually, it will fall off at that point unnaturally. In other words, something will bang against it and it will fall off. Now, something bangs against. So, if you look at the left corner side, the right corner side, you'll see the little indentation on the top. That's a sign that it fell off while it was growing on the tree naturally. If you have an esrig, if it's white, very white, stop being choishish, or if it's rough, you have to be choishish. It looks like it would fall off. You start seeing many of them. You start understanding how the different pitums look, and you'll notice if it fell off or not. A lot of the Eretz Yisrael esrogim, the Badatz ones, the pitum is actually made out of flesh. So that's very easy to tell that it fell off in the middle, because when it falls off, you actually see like the flesh of the esrog inside. That doesn't happen on the tree. On the tree, it would dry up and look like a piece of wood.
So is that a problem?
That would be puzzle. At least the first day.
What's the requirement? I mean, why do we have this requirement with the pitum?
Esrog is not allowed to be missing any pieces. If it's missing chasivitz puzzle on the first day, there's another concern that it has to be a pre-eitz hadar, it has to be a beautiful fruit, and if the pitum is what makes it look beautiful, and if it's missing a pitum, if it fell off, then its beauty was taken off. That could also be a problem.
And also the Rosh was saying on the first day, so what does that mean afterwards?
Chasiv is only psul on the first day, and the second day it could be its kosher. Now, so that's why if pitum falls off doesn't mean it's puzzle. It just mean if it's sticking up a little bit, if you still have part that's coming up, see this pitum looks like it's going to fall off because it dried up around the pitum.
But that would be natural.
So if you put it off, you could see it's dried up around the pitum.
But that would be a smooth
the bottom,
then.
That's going to fall off eventually.
Right.
The pitum's part of being hadar. Why is it okay to have one that fell off naturally? Isn't it not as beautiful as
So the idea is that it's as if the esrog came without a pitum. So never had it, it doesn't need it. Now, I'd like to just discuss what you look at an esrog. I just want to know what's there, what's on the esrog, what are all these things that you're seeing on the esrog. Now here we have something which I asked him to send me 2 puzzle esrogim. I'm trying to figure out why he sent me that esrog. I know why he sent me this esrog, but it doesn't mean it's puzzle. The question is, what is this thing on the esrog here? Now, it's very possible that he's right. He says that perhaps this is a chazazis. Now, chazazis is something which is like a blister or something which grows on an esrog, which is very, very uncommon to see. It's hard to know what it is exactly. And he claims that maybe this is it. Usually it has some water in it. I don't know if this has water in it, but I'll pass it around. You can look at it because it's a very strange thing to see on esrog. But what we find more commonly on esrog, before I pass this around, is what we call bletlach. Now, there are many different kinds of bletlach. Most of the spots on this esrog you have here is a good example of a bletl. You have one on this side, on the opposite side of the. I should really color with a pen so everybody could see it.
Want a good marker that doesn't indent?
Yeah. It doesn't indent. All right, I circle the bletl here, and I'll circle the other bletl cholova, as you can see spots. I want to show you that one for a reason. Here on the bottom is a better one. Here's a bletl you can see better on the bottom. Okay. So I'll pass it around. Now these things are basically scabs.
There's a couple of bletels.
Here's bletl here. This looks like actually a piece of the esrog came off and scabbed over.
Do you want this
So
still?
this looks like a piece came off, actually scabbed over.
And there's another one over here. There's another one here.
Yeah, there's another one here. There's also a bletl. See, there's a bletl. Looks like a scab. So, what's the halacha with these scabs? These scabs are things that there are different kinds of blettel. Some comes. There are many things that can come on an esrog. You can have dirt from the outside, dust. You have esrog dust that comes on the outside. I mean, it's a tree with dust and all kinds of things there. So there's the dust on the outside makes it dirty, but it really has nothing to do with the esrog. If you could clean it off, it would be kosher. And sometimes you have outside elements that sort of things that, like worms, could sometimes leave some trail and things on the esrog, which could look like a blettel, but it's actually just the residue of a worm that left some secretion and stuff on the esrog, and that's actually kosher, because who cares? It's separate. It has nothing to do with the esrog itself. But when we talk about a blettel, we're talking about something that sometimes the regular person would not be able to differentiate between all these different things. But we're talking about something which has more of a scab, which grew on the esrog from within the esrog, because it's got a cut, a scratch from a leaf on the tree, a thorn on the tree gave it a scratch, and it's sort of scabbed over. You see it? What? You don't see anything there? What?
It doesn't jump out at me anyway.
I circled it.
No.
Like just
There's
scabs,
two of them,
right?
one on each side.
It's like a couple scabs, right?
Yeah, there's a couple
Yeah.
of scabs on that one, yeah. A couple of scabs. So, the question is, what's the halacha of these scabs? Now, there are some that want to contend that perhaps it has a halacha of a chazazis, again, of a blister, something that grows from within the esrog, which, halachically, could be a concern if you have one on the top part of the esrog, or if you have three on the bottom, could be a concern. But based on the Trumas Hadeshin, there's two svaras that it would be kosher. One svara is that something which is, if you feel it, it doesn't jump up, it doesn't stick up from the esrog. It doesn't, like this one over here, this sticks up. You feel it, it sticks up. It's higher than, this thing over here is higher than the esrog. But the other blettels, like the one I circled here, you'll never know by feeling it. It's flush with the esrog. So the ones that are flush with the esrog don't have halach of chazazis, and it's kosher. Okay? The other svara is, if it's natural for an esrog to have it, it's not called a shining mar, it's not called a change. And something which is natural to be on an esrog is kosher also. So you have two svaras. According to the second svara, even if it would jut up, but if it's natural, it would be kosher. Now you have, okay, so that's the blettel. Now, blettels are very common. On most esrogim you find blettels all over the place. You have some that look like that are more like a scab. You have some that are brown dots. You have a lot of them on this one. You have brown dots here on the top. You have dots, just colorations in the esrog. Without looking under the loop, it's very hard to see what it is. Sometimes it's a scab, and sometimes it's a discoloration of the esrog. See, you look at each one, it looks a little different. When you see it underneath, you can tell what it is. Now, most of the times we're more or less unconcerned with those as far as kashrus. But sometimes there could be the scabbed over, but not fully. So in other words, on the tree, the leaf would make a little scratch or a hole, and it would scab over. But if the scab doesn't scab over fully, you're left with the hole. And that could possibly be chassid, depending how deep the hole is. Okay? What's common, which we didn't mention by the pitimless esrogim, many of the pitimless esrogim have, the ones that go in might have actually a hole in the middle. And some of that holes go all the way deep down in till the pit, till the, let's see, we have a picture of it, yeah, you can see actually in this one, you can actually see in this picture that there's a hole in the middle. This is actually a pretty big hole. Usually they're smaller and it's hard to see. And that hole, here, this is a demonstration of it. So you have a pitim, and then there's sort of the chedri azera sort of goes up until the pitim. That's how naturally it grows. There's like a little string that goes up. So sometimes if you have a hole in the pitim that goes in, it could actually go in. A hole is possible if it reaches until where the chedri azera is, till where the seeds go, till the pulp, where the seeds go. If the hole reaches that point, that esrog is possible. So if I take a needle make a hole into this esrog without taking out any part of the esrog. If I take out, it's considered chassid. But if there's a hole in it, without removing any part of the esrog, it won't be possible unless that hole reaches the middle of the esrog. It's very uncommon to stick a pin in it to reach the middle esrog, but on a pitum, when it's a pitum, sometimes there's a hole in there. I'll show you a picture over here. Sometimes there's a hole, and that hole will reach the chedrei hazera. And an expert will actually stick in a little pin, something very thin inside, to see how far down it goes. I wouldn't try that on your own. Here, this picture over here is actually a picture with a hole in it. Now, we'll get to the final point here. We'll let you go. So the final point would be the black spots on the esrog. Now again, the black spots that would be puzzle is something which is a spoilage on the esrog. Some spots that come naturally on the esrog from the when it gets spoiled, it starts going, you get a black spot. I actually saw an esrog by his house, he didn't send it to me here, that had such a black spot. But a lot of the black dots we find in our esrogs are 90% foreign particles that got embedded into the esrog itself. And some people try to take it out. I wouldn't suggest taking it out unless you know what you're doing, because sometimes they're very embedded into the esrog. By actually taking it out, you're going to have to, it's like taking a splinter out. You're going to have to, make a hole in the esrog, which is, the esrog is better off with the black dot without the hole, because the black dot is just a piece of dirt. Well, people get very nervous from it, because since the halacha says something that's black is puzzle, how do I know why this thing is black? But 99% of the black dots we have are not considered a shinei mara. They're just something outside particle. What you could have from the black dots is sometimes the black dot could be a burn. Sometimes even dark brown dots could be burn holes, because the water on that sometimes gets on the esrog when it's growing. The sun could come and, like a magnifying glass, bore a hole, and he has a picture of one of those in there. And that hole, unless you look with a magnifying glass, you might not notice it. But that hole could actually be a hole in the esrog. Depending how deep it goes, it could be a problem.
But is that common or very?
What?
Is that common or very uncommon?
It's not very uncommon, but it could be. It's a possibility. A lot of people, will scrutinize an esrog, but you hold it like this far and you turn it, and whatever's noticeable, that you have to be concerned of. Whatever's not noticeable, spots that you wouldn't have to be concerned of. Now, a guy that's too good, has been seen many esrogim, could notice the spots much quicker. Obviously, if you're trained, it's like finding bugs in your lettuce. If you're trained, you find it. If you're not trained, you don't find it. But basically, that's what you're looking for. The spoilage that comes on the esrog is not healthy. All these things, they all take away from the hiddur. They take away from the hiddur, but not actually puzzle. One way to verify if this would be considered a psol, this is saying from the esrog itself, but many things can be peeled off. Many of these scabs, if you have the right instrument, you can peel them off, and the skin is still intact on top. That will be a sign that it's just a side scab and it's not puzzle. Rather, that it's something from within the esrog. This looks more like something within the esrog that you wouldn't be able to peel off. And you wouldn't be, if you would peel it off, you wouldn't be left with a skin on the esrog. That would be a sign that it's more of a chazazis rather than a scab. So that's basically the idea of a esrog.
The whole Indian about the top third.
The top chaitim starts about here. That's the beauty of the esrog. And when you look at an esrog, this is what you see. When you look at an esrog nosedive, that's what you see, the top part. And that part is supposed to be clean. Some people find beautiful esrog and there's a big spot on top. They don't realize better get spots on the bottom than on top, because this is the heart of the esrog, is the top, and that part should be clean, totally clean. And if there's a brown dot on it, it takes away a little bit of the hiddur. If there's a black dot on it, it could be puzzle, depending what kind of black dot, as we discussed.
Israel is the land of happiness. It is indeed one of the happiest countries in the world.
Chag Sameach. We stand right before Chag HaSukkot. The Abarbanel in Parshas Re'eh says something very beautiful about Sukkot. When describing the three Chagim, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, he says that those Chagim are not just coming to remember something, those are Chagim which give an opportunity to give us Hakaras HaTov, an appreciation for something which we have. On Pesach, we're not only celebrating Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're celebrating the fact that we are Am Yisrael, that with coming out of Mitzrayim, we became Klal Yisrael. With Shavuot, we're not just celebrating that we got the Torah, we're celebrating that we are not only special in who we are, we're special in what we do. We appreciate, we give a Hakaras HaTov to Hashem for giving us the way to act in a special way. For Sukkot, the Abarbanel says something special. For Sukkot, the Abarbanel says we're giving appreciation to Eretz Yisrael. What does Sukkot have to do with Eretz Yisrael? On Sukkot, we're celebrating having been in Sukkot in the Midbar. We're celebrating the miracles which happened in the Midbar. We're celebrating having gotten man and being protected in the Midbar. What does that have to do with Eretz Yisrael? I think I'll explain what the Abarbanel meant. Going back to what we said before, the Abarbanel is explaining that when we remember what was, we're not just thanking Hashem for what was, we're thanking and giving appreciation for what is. When we remember what happened in the Midbar, that in the Midbar we could only be protected by miracles which we were not a part of, by food coming from the sky, by wars fought, with complete miracles, and with very little chance of us winning. When we come, what we have now, when we walk into our sukkah, we show appreciation and we realize we are not in a midbar anymore. Now we're home. Now we have Eretz Yisrael. We sit there and we remember in the midbar, you had to protect us with miracles, which we did not take a part in. When we're home, we take part in it. We walk into that sukkah and we don't just sit and wait for food. In the sukkah, we do all of our regular activity. We sit and we play and we eat and we speak and we do all sorts of regular things in the sukkah, and we appreciate what we have. We celebrate with the Daled Minim because the esrog and the arava are fruit which we couldn't have had in the midbar. We celebrate as opposed to the midbar by saving us in the midbar.
When you learn halakha deeply, sometimes it actually brings out tremendous insights in the hashkafa, in the Weltanschauung, in the world outlook, the philosophy of what exactly you're approaching. So absolutely one of my favorite sugiyot that I ever learned in Sukkah is the case of the famous Antwerp Schach. Now the story of the Antwerp Schach really starts many hundred years before. Rabbeinu Tam had a brother-in-law who built a beautiful sukkah, and he was very proud of himself. He had one of the greatest chaps in Jewish halachic history. He built a sukkah, and it's not clear exactly what it looked like, but it was built like a kamin kippah. It was rounded, and somehow he was able to keep the rain out of the sukkah. He built it in such a way that rain wouldn't come into the sukkah. So what did he do? He was very proud of himself. He had this great chap, and he called over his brother-in-law, and of course, like a good neighborhood rabbi, he said puzzle. He says, a good chap, good try, nice thought, but it's puzzle. So there's a Tosfot just in the beginning of Masechet Sukkah, on the very first daf, base Amud Aleph, right, page 2, folio A. In the bottom left corner, there's a Tosfot over there that talks about the idea that rain has to come into a sukkah. It's going on the famous opening, the three different reasons why, where we learn the idea that a sukkah has to be a dirat arai, has to be a temporary dwelling place. It cannot be a permanent dwelling place. And Rava gives us a tremendous insight that the walls could be made out of concrete bricks. Anybody who saw the Smolarski Sukkah on the other side of the house, right? You have 3 solid concrete walls. That's not a problem of Dirat Arai. It's still called Dirat Arai. We see that the idea of building it so tall that the only way to accomplish such a structure is by making it kavua, that's a problem of Dirat Kva. But to make it out of solid materials, that's not a problem. And you could use concrete as long as it's less than 20 amma. So Tosfot asks a question about the schach. And Tosfot says, wait a second. We're going to see a Gemara later on Daf Chav Beit Amud Bet, right? 22, folio B, that tells us that rain, right? If it rains inside your sukkah, you have to leave. Right? If enough rain comes in that it spoils the mikvah, the porridge, the soup, the stew, you're not allowed to stay in the sukkah, or it's not a mitzvah to stay in the sukkah, then becomes a question if you're allowed to or not, and you got to go inside. And then the Mishnah tells us inside the Mishnah, Mashal Amad Davar Domeh. There's a parable for this idea. What's the parable of this idea that it rains in your sukkah, you got to go? It's the parable of a servant who comes into his master, Limzog Lokos. He comes to water down his wine. Because back in the time of the Talmud, the wine used to be highly concentrated, and you couldn't drink it unless you watered it down. So the Eved comes in, the servant comes in to water down his master's wine, and the master spills the kiton, he spills the pitcher into the servant's face. Right? It's a siman klala. It's a sign of curse if it rains on Sukkot when you're trying to fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah. And from there, Tosfot learned, they asked the question, wait a second, if it's not a problem what material I use, it's just, does it have to be permanent the way I built it or not? The material's the way it's done. Tosfot asks the question, why can't I just nail down my schach? Right? And then the rain won't come in. And then there's no siman klala. Why are we talking about a sign of curse at all? So from there, Tosfot learns an unbelievable thing, that the whole idea of Dirat Arai goes after the schach. And the schach alone, whatever you put on top of your sukkah, that's what establishes it. Is it a permanent dwelling? Is it a temporary dwelling? Your sukkah could be built entirely out of concrete, brick, steel, reinforced steel, whatever you want. As long as the schach on top is not permanent, that's called a temporary dwelling place, and you live in a sukkah. Now we see from this Tosfot, seemingly, that one of the prerequisites for a kosher sukkah is that rain has to be able to get inside. So it sounds like. And there's a whole discussion as to why Tosfot tells us it's no good. Is it because it sounds like from Tosfot over there, it's because what's called Gzerah HaTikra, that if the roof is so permanent, then you're going to get confused and you could think maybe I could do sukkah inside my living room also. Right? And so our sages tell us that, okay, even though really it should be kosher, we're going to say it's not kosher, because we don't want to cause confusion. There's other ideas as to why the rain has to come in. Maybe it's a Torah prohibition, because maybe that in itself is showing that it's a permanent dwelling place because rain can't come in. Whatever it is, we see from that Tosfot this idea, seemingly, that rain has to be able to come in. Now there's another Mishnah that tells us that there's a disagreement between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai about schach, which is mu'uva kemin bayit. It's so thick, the schach is so thick, it's like a house. Now obviously we don't put palm fronds on our houses anymore. Maybe someplace in Australia, some Aborigines have some thatched roofs, where if you stack it so thick, right, then it's like a house. So that b'diavad, if you already did it, it's kosher, but like atchila, it's no good. You have to be able to see stars through the schach. So you see two prerequisites for schach. One, you have to be able to see the stars, like atchila, through the schach. And two, rain has to be able to come into your house. Manya? So somebody had a great chap, and they developed what was known as the Antwerp schach Antwerpen. And they designed the schach in such a way that it was shaped and overlapped, so that if you stood at the angle, if you stood vis-a-vis, you could see the stars. But because of the shape, the rain couldn't go into the sukkah. And if not mistaken, Rav Chaim Kreisworth, who was then the Rav in Antwerp, sent the question onward to the Gedolim here in Israel. And there was the house that everybody was talking about that year and for the next 5 years and even 40 years later. The Antwerp schach, kosher or not kosher. L'maaseh, even Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said that it was kosher, but don't use it. So we don't use the Antwerp schach, but
like a good community rabbi.
Yeah, it's good, but it's mutter, but
Better not to.
better not to. Okay, so just there we see this idea that from the whole sugi of Antwerp schach, we come to two very interesting ideas. What is it, hashkafically, about a sukkah, philosophically? Why is a sukkah a place where you have to be able to see the stars and rain has to come in? It's a strange thing, right? If rain comes in, then you have to leave. Wouldn't it be better if we could just find a way that we don't have to leave the sukkah? Let us stay inside. Why does it sound from Tosfot that the Siman Klala is part of what makes a kosher sukkah? And more than that, he's not even here, Ilana. I said I was going to put in one piece of Chassidus, so here's my one piece of Chassidus. I'll put it in the most Litvish way I can. Yeah, I'll put it in the most Litvish possible way. The Sfas Emes, in trying to understand what is the psul, this idea, why do you have to leave because of the rain coming in, the Siman Klala. So he says that's it, that's the halacha. There's a halacha called Siman Klala. If Hashem can't give you a klala on Sukkot, it's no good, you can't be in your sukkah. So that was my Chassidus, because Sfas Emes said something on the Gemara, and I brought it in. So good. So, but that's it. Sfas Emes says, Ad Kedei Kach, that's the halacha. Why? Because there's a halacha that Hashem has to be able to give you a klala on Sukkot. Very interesting, very strange. We don't see that there's any other Yom Tov where Hashem has to be able to give us a klala. As a matter of fact, any time else we're able to avoid the klala, you avoid the klala. Why stick yourself in a situation where you're going to ruin the opportunity of a mitzvah for yourself? Okay, so when we sit in a sukkah, what exactly are we commemorating when we sit in the sukkah? So it starts in the Torah, goes to Shulchan Aruch, La Halacha. We're commemorating the Ananei Kavod in the desert. Meaning there's a machloket in the Gemara between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. What is the sukkah commemorating exactly? We know Pesach's very clear, right? Zman Chirutenu, that's when we left Egypt. Shavuot, very clear, we received the Torah. Sukkot, what's it all about? It's a commemoration of something. Rabbi Akiva says it's when we sat in Sukkot in the desert. Sukkot mamish. Meaning we went to the desert, we had to dwell in something. People weren't sleeping, it wasn't Rabbi Shimon, they weren't going under the sand and covering themselves over with a blanket of sand. They had to have some sort of a dwelling place. Right? These were actually the Sukkot that they built in the desert. And the second one is Ananei Kavod. Rabbi Eliezer says no. It's the fact that when they went through the desert, they were surrounded by Ananei Kavod. Okay, and that's the halacha as the Torah paskin, Shulchan Aruch paskin, halacha l'maaseh. Just so I had this experience today, where someone heard a nice vort in a shiur and tried to paskin a halacha from it, and I said, it's very nice, but that's not the halacha. It's a nice vort. But halacha l'maaseh, when you sit in your sukkah, you should have a kavanah for both. You should have the kavanah both for Sukkot mamish, and for Ananei Kavod. Okay. Now there's those who want to explain the machloket of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva very nicely, Elu Divrei Elokim Chaim, that Sukkot has a remarkable uniqueness to it that Rav Hutner speaks about extensively in the Tachat Yitzchak, that Sukkot is actually the endpoint of two different cycles of Chagim. On the one hand, we see that it's the end of the Gimel Regalim, right? The three pilgrimage festivals going up, right? It's Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And on the other hand, it's also the end of the three holidays of Tshuva,
of repentance in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Because we do see that there's some sort of a continuation of the din, of the judgment of Rosh Hashanah still continues over into Sukkot, and that's why people continue to wish each other and Piskatova, or how do they like to say in Yiddish, a good kvittel. Have a good kvittel. Trying to make it as much as possible. All right. So there are those who want to answer like this. These two festivals, and there's other remarkable things we see about Sukkot. For example, it's the only Chag where we seem to have a doubling of the korbanos of the day. We bring 14 sheep as opposed to the standard 7 which you bring on a Chag. And there are those who want to learn that really Sukkot is 2 Chagim. It's 2 festivals. What are these 2 festivals? There was something called Chag HaAsif. And Chag HaAsif was the time that everybody was bringing in the harvest. And what's the idea of Chag HaAsif? The idea of Chag HaAsif is that you spend all this time plowing the field, sowing the seeds, working, anybody who's ever even tried to grow anything in their garden knows it's a tremendous amount of work to grow produce. It's not simple. Your produce finally comes about. You're bundling it up, you're gathering it up, you're going into your home, you're feeling like the wealthiest person on the planet because not only do you have now all the stuff you work so hard on, but stuff that you work so hard on. Now's the time where we say, okay, now go out of your house, go into the sukkah, right? Remind yourself that you feel, Kochem V'otzim Yadi, I did all this by myself. Remind yourself, no, this is Hashem's world. All this material stuff is nice, but that's not the essence. The essence is being with Hashem. Go sit in the sukkah, right? And that works very nicely with the pshat of Rabbi Akiva of Sukkot Mamish, right? Really go sit in a sukkah. Remember that when the Jewish people were in the desert, they might have had nicer things when they were in Mitzrayim. Nicer clothes, nicer, right? There were certainly things they missed about their life in Mitzrayim. But the point was, we're going after Hashem no matter what. We just want to be with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. We just want to be with Hashem. We'll be in the desert. What are we going to have? Not much. Little, shanties, little shacks. That's what we'll build. But we'll be with Hashem. Zahayikar. That's what's important. So that works very nicely with Rabbi Akiva. Now, for Rabbi Eliezer, that it's Ananei HaKavod, right? So here we have the idea of a Chag that's connected to Tshuva. Why? What was the idea of the Ananei HaKavod? The Torah asks a famous question when he introduces in the first Siman, when he's speaking about B'chot Sukkah. The Torah says, look, if the whole thing is about us going out of Mitzrayim and being in the Sukkah, it's during the wrong time of year. We should be celebrating Sukkot at the same time as we're celebrating Pesach. Why are we waiting all the way to Tishrei at the beginning of the winter? What's the connection?
Well, it is the only holiday that doesn't have an event attached to it. It could happen anytime.
Okay.
Over 40 years.
Okay, so we're going to hold on to that insight, and we'll see if there's an event or no event. So the Torah's answer is, it's a very, I don't know, it's hard because, it's the Torah, right? It's the first person who ever organized all of halacha into, 4 categories. He was the son of the Rosh. He'd been all through Europe. He'd seen everything. Right? The Torah was a tremendous gaon. And the answer seems very, I don't know, balabatish. Very simple, very pashut. The Torah says, why is it in the winter? Because if we did it in the summer, and don't forget the Torah lived in Spain, so they knew how to do summer in Spain. Anyways, everybody goes out into the fields and builds little, summer homes and shacks and hangs out for the, the shade and enjoy the fields and the whole thing. If we went out and built a sukkah in the middle of the spring, right, in the middle of, when Sukkot is, in the middle of the spring, so everybody would think we're just going to enjoy the weather like the rest of them. It says that's why we do it in the winter, because that's the time of the Gshamim, that's when the rain starts to come down. Mainly and now everybody, what?
Mainly on the plane.
Yeah, in Spain, right. There's the Spain connection, well done. The rain starts to come, and everybody will know we're here for the mitzvah. Okay? That's the Torah. We're going to put that Torah to the side. Now, there's a famous piece by the Vilna Gaon on his commentary to Shir HaShirim, where the Vilna Gaon gives possibly an alternative answer. We'll see at the end, maybe it's the same answer as the Torah. But the Vilna Gaon says the following. The Vilna Gaon says that the Ananei Kavod, what we're celebrating on Sukkah, is actually the return of the Ananei Kavod. Why? Because when the Jewish people sinned at Chet HaEgel, the Ananei Kavod went away. We're without Ananei Kavod. We're vulnerable during that whole time. Moshe goes up. He prays for us, right? We do tshuva. He prays on our behalf. We have all the days that go by, all the way till Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, Hashem accepts our tshuva, right? We have kapara. And then, 5 days later, the Ananei Kavod comes back. So according to the Gaon Vilna, what are we celebrating on Sukkot, the Ananei Kavod? An event! What was the event? The event was the Ananei Kavod came back. When did it happen? Right in the middle of Tishrei, right? The 15th of Tishrei, the clouds come back. So what are we celebrating on Sukkot? We're celebrating the return of the Ananei HaKavod. That is the answer of the Gaon. Now, one question that we have to ask, right? The Gaon himself speaks it out, so we have to ask it for ourselves, is how does the Gaon know it was on the 15th of Tishrei? So the Gaon does a very simple calculation. He explains to us why it happens on the 15th, because the 10th day was, our tshuva was accepted, right? Yom Kippur. The 11th day, Moshe comes down and he gives us the tzivui. We're learning like Rashi over here. Moshe comes down from Har Sinai and he tells us on the 11th day of Tishrei, gives us a commandment, time to start building the Mishkan. 2 days, that's what it says Beferish in the Chumash, for 2 days they brought, Boker, they brought all their stuff for 2 days. The 3rd day Moshe says that's it, too much. And the 5th day everybody starts building the Mishkan, Ananei Kavod come back. That's the order of events going from the 10th to the 15th.
So the trigger is starting to build the Mishkan.
Oh. Says Rabbi Osterker something very interesting. It sounds like what brings the Ananei Kavod back is the building of the Mishkan itself, because that's the day when the clouds come back. Right?
Correct.
In other words, what was this 5-day period between Yom Kippur and the Mishkan? Because the number 5 doesn't seem to have a particular significance to us over here.
If it had taken Moshe 3 days before he said enough, would it have been on the 16th? That's a question I'm asking.
Good question. Right? Good question. We'll have to find the time. We'll have to find some sort of reason as to why this day would kick off the return of the Ananei Kavod. But good. According to the Gaon Mivilna, so what are we commemorating? We're commemorating the return of the clouds. Now, it's very nice. If we understand that Sukkot is this doubling of Chagim, right? The end of the Gimel Regalim, which are all about crops and harvests, which we spoke about on last Rosh Hashanah. And then according to the second cycle, it's the end of the Tshuva cycle. So now it could be Elu Ve'elu, very nice. Rabbi Kiva was saying that the Ikar, the main idea of the mitzvah, goes with Chag HaAsif, the harvesting festival. And Rabbi Eliezer, who learns that it's Ananei Kavod, it could be going with the end of the Tshuva cycle, right? The end of, and then each one going in their own way. Fine, good. So now that we have this setup, right, what's the basic essence when you sit in a sukkah? So what is a sukkah? A sukkah, we know, has to be a dirah, right? A minimum for anything to be a dirah has to be at least 2 walls. If I don't have at least 2 walls protecting me, if I can't back into my corner and feel like I'm protected on 2 sides, I don't have a dirah, right? 1 wall isn't called the dirah. It's not called the living space. A living space is defined minimally at least by 2 walls. We have halacha Moshe Misinai, a special halacha from Moshe, right, directly, that you have to have a 3rd wall. And that third wall only has to be a tefach in size. This big. Okay, we'll add another piece of proto-Chasidus over here, which is that the Arizal asks, what's the idea of the third wall of a tefach, right? If each wall has to be at least 7 tefachim, 7 cubits, hand breadths, cubits. Oh, now it's a cubit. Hand breadths. There has to be a better name than that. All right, 7 hand breadths, right? Because that's roughly the size a person needs to sit and have a table, right? Roughly 7 hand breadths. So what's this idea of a third wall, which is the size of 1 hand breadth of this tefach? So the Arizal says something unbelievable. The Arizal says, what's that shape? He says it's a very familiar shape. He says because you can look at it on yourself. It's like this, and like this, and like this. The Arizal says that it's a remez, it's an allusion to Hashem embracing us. Right? The whole idea of sitting in the sukkah is we're sitting in Hashem's embrace. It's the only mitzvah that we sit entirely inside of the mitzvah. Right? You're sitting in... Huh? Living in Israel, it's a... Machlokah Rishonim. Okay, and according to the Ramban, living in Eretz Yisrael. Very good. So, we have Hashem's embrace. Hashem's holding us, right? According to either, whether you go like Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, you're sitting in the sukkah, you're being embraced. But we see that there's the main idea of the dwelling place comes from the schach. And a connection to rain and looking up in the heavens. And we can start to develop a sort of an approach to understand what's going on over here. Rashi, famously in the Chumash, speaks about the idea that in Mitzrayim, they never had to look up. Mitzrayim, you only had to look down. I think we spoke about this. Mitzrayim comes from the word Meitzarim, things that narrow us. Paro is from the word Parua, they have to be buried above ground, all their gods had to be visible. Everything in Mitzrayim you had to be able to, spirituality had to be tangible. So when they wanted to water the fields, what did they do? They went over to the Nile, they set up nice, little ditches, furrows that went into their fields. They kicked open the block, the water went down, watered their fields, they never had to worry about, watering the crops. Everybody came to Eretz Yisrael, right? You know what it's like here in the winters. When you need to water your crops, what do? You gotta look up. You gotta daven. You have to ask Hashem to bring the rains. If you don't ask Hashem, you're not gonna have rain. Just like Adam Arishon, right? That until Hashem, the rain never came, Rashi in Bereshis, the rain never came till Adam Arishon was created, so he could daven for the rain. There's a relationship between us and Hashem that when we want to see fertility and things come to fruition, Hashem wants us to develop a relationship with Him, to realize that all the chesed in our life, all the goodness comes from Him, and we have to turn to Him as the Gomel Chasadim, as the one who gives us all this chesed, and say, please Hashem, we want your chesed. So there's this unbelievable idea about rain. Rain represents this idea of more than chesed, really rachamim. Rain represents mercy, because we know that rain at times can also be din, right, in the generation of the flood, when the rain didn't stop. So rachamim, the balance between giving and taking, that is our relationship with Hashem, the relationship with rain. So when you come into a sukkah, you see that you have a very similar thing. The idea of the sukkah, again, as we're saying, is get away from your belief that everything happens with your own hand. From the belief that you need all this physical comfort, and sit with Hashem. And if you can't look up, right, and see and feel that connection through the roof, right, that's where, when a person wants to feel it, the powerful hashkafa, the powerful idea we're learning from the Gemara over here, is that when a person wants to feel secure, what does he do? He builds a solid roof. When you have a solid roof, you feel totally secure, like I'm in control. And I don't need Hashem anymore. He's out of the picture. I don't need him. The Gemara tells us you have to be able to somehow see beyond the house, have a connection with the natural world. So, the idea of seeing the stars, there's a Prima Gadim that's brought in many places. The Prima Gadim, I want to read the whole, he brings a pasuk, a beautiful pasuk, says that even if you have a roof which is thatched, which is very, very thick, he said it's good enough, go into the corner, pull out a chunk, right, in your sukkah, so that you can see the stars from that corner. Why, he says? So that you should remember, Mi bara ela v'liot gar ba'aretz. Right? Who created these? Right? Look at these unbelievable, right? The stars that are the intermediaries of Hashem for all of nature. To remind yourself, when you're living in the earth, you're earthbound, who created everything which is around you? Right? There's a whole question why he learns that rain doesn't work that way. But he understands the reason is you have to feel when you're in the sukkah, Mi bara ela. You have to be able to see the stars and remember that the world was created by Hashem. Now, there's an interesting, in the Bikur Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, in his halachic glosses to Masechet Sukkah, he says, I don't know, where does the Pri Megadim get this from? There's no source anywhere in all of halacha that says this idea, Mi bara ela, is, that's his chiddush. He also is not sure how he feels about it, if it's a good chiddush or not a good chiddush. But we definitely see that the Pri Megadim was driven to understand this idea of seeing the stars, because you have to feel Mi bara ela. Now, we didn't do it together, the shiur on LeDavid, but there's a powerful idea in LeDavid that helps us understand the idea of a sukkah. So everybody, a lot of people, shouldn't say everybody, we all learned in Cheder that Ori v'Yishi, Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur. Hashem Ori v'Yishi. Hashem is my light and my salvation, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And if you go in the continuation, this part people speak about less. It says, Yitzpineni b'Sukkah v'Yom Ra'ah. Hashem, this word tzafun is a hard word. How would you translate it? Tzafun. Hidden. He hides me. He hides me in his sukkah on a Yom Ra'ah, on a bad day. But then, David HaMelech continues and says, Yastireni b'seter ahalo. So now what's the difference? We see there's two things. There's a sukkah and there's an ohel. And there's being tzafun and then there's being nistar. So we know that an ohel, that's as covered as you can get, right? That was the whole praise that Bilam said to the Jewish people. Matovu alecha Yaakov. How good are your tents, Yaakov? Why? Because they were so tzanua, they were so private, they couldn't see into each other's tents. In a tent, you're nistar. Nistar means you're hidden entirely. But the word David HaMelech uses by sukkah is yatzpineni, to be tzafun. To be tzafun means to store something for later use. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely hidden. Like the or tzafun, like tzadikim, the hidden light that Hashem hides, it means to put something in a storage to remove it later. So we see that a sukkah is not as enclosed as this idea of an ohel. And why is that? So now we're going to say another piece of Rav Yaakov Ettlinger, because anytime I have the opportunity to quote a piece of Torah from Rav Yaakov Ettlinger, I get very excited, because if you ever learn Sukkah, to be able to learn it with the Orach Laner, the Bikur Yaakov, there's not a lot of Sfarim, very special Sfarim like that. You know who he was? A Rebbe shel Rav Hirsch. Ken. So Rav Yaakov Ettlinger, in the end of Orach Laner, on Masechet Sukkah, decided to make a siyum for all his students. Because they did sukkah together, so he wanted to make something exciting for them. And he gave a whole drasha on the machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, why Beit Hillel learns that a sukkah has to be dirat arai, and Beit Shammai learned that a sukkah has to be dirat kva. And he says, because everywhere we look, the machloket between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai is how much we act today, right, like Yemot HaMashiach, and how much has to do with living in the here and now. And that's why our Chachamim tell us that in Yemot HaMashiach, halacha is like Beit Shammai. But now, halacha is like Beit Hillel. So you see here too, When you're nistar ba'ohel, entirely enclosed in a completely sealed relationship with Hashem, that you're totally separated from any outside world, that's how connected you are in spirituality, that's not for now. That's for Yemot HaMashiach. Now, Kanes. Nowadays, before Yemot HaMashiach, we're still living in a process of tikkun, where we have to see the world around us. We have to connect to the world around us. We have to involve the world around us in part of that process of moving closer to Hashem. So that's the idea of a sukkah. You can't ever, if you're in a sukkah, if you're in a sukkah and you don't feel that you're part of the world, you only feel connected to Hashem, pasul, no good. When you're in a sukkah, you have to feel, you have to look up to your schach, and you have to say, Mi bara ela, but lagur ba'aretz. Well, I'm here living my life in the world, I have to involve Hashem, see how Hashem's connected, right? That's Yaspinei b'sukkah b'yom ra'ah. It's not a world of tikkun yet. It's still a world that needs a lot of fixing. It's a yom ra'ah. That's the idea of a sukkah. Okay. So we see it's that powerful that the Pri Megadim from there learns this idea that even lahalacha, that's why you have to be able to see the stars. Now, let's go the idea of the rain, the other idea of the Antwerp sky. The idea of rain. Why does rain have to be able to come into my sukkah? If I can fix up the problem, if I can keep the rain out, right? We don't see anywhere else that it's, if Hashem can't curse me, then I haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. Here the mitzvah of a sukkah is fulfilled at the moment where I'm in a situation where Hashem can curse me. Okay. What?
Like, what if you use the mantra of
How much?
Make like small holes on the edges of the ring again in some places, so it's just not there.
Good. Yeah, there's a whole lot of discussion in halacha about exactly that question. And as a matter of fact, even the question of if I cut a hole in one part of the skach, and that's where the rain comes in, is that enough? Does it have to be throughout? Is there an idea of dalet machim of skach puzzle over here or not? But we know that the Gemara says that if it's enough to ruin the mikvah, if it's enough to ruin the dish of the night, right, that's the point where you have to leave the sukkah. So if a little bit of rain comes in, but you would still continue to eat, it doesn't bother you so much, that's not called yet that you have to leave. If so much rain gets in that it's unpleasant, you can't even eat the soup because it's getting watered down. There's another Hasidic word over here, by the way. Oh, we're getting three now. The Tzanzer Rebbe, the previous Tzanzer Rebbe, say that if rain comes into the sukkah, so then and it goes into the soup, so then there's more soup for everybody. And that's why the Tzanzer Rebbe used to sit in his sukkah when it rained. That's a different discussion, but we're not going to go to that discussion.
It's a bracha.
So he was a Chabad.
He was a Tzanzer. Fine. Okay. So, like this. If we go back to the idea of the gon, and we go to Rabbi Ostreicher's question. So on the 10th day, we had the kapara. Right? Why didn't the clouds of glory come back on Yom Kippur? What was happening for 5 days that we had to wait till the 15th day? That's when the clouds of glory come back. So, I think you can say it from Svara. Rav Ostreicher was already jumping on the Svara. I also saw it in the name of Rav Matisyahu Solomon from Lakewood. This idea that you see that Hashem forgave you. Okay, great. So let's say Shlomo, you and I were developing a relationship, our friendship that blossomed into a beautiful friendship, and one day I do something and I wrong you. And now I have to fix that wrong. I have to come to you and I have to say to you, I'm sorry, I did something that wasn't appropriate. And it might take you some time. So eventually you say, you know what, I forgive you. Now, let me ask you a question. The second you say I forgive you, that's it? Best of friends, back to what it was before? You're a good friend. Usually there's a period where we have to regain a trust. redevelop the relationship. Okay, so you forgave me, but does that mean that you're excited about our relationship moving forward?
Sometimes the relationship is stronger.
Oh, sometimes when you do it right, the relationship is stronger afterwards. The amazing thing when we talk about the Ananei Kavod is that of the 3 miracles that we had in the desert, right? The manna, the Be'er Miriam, the water that we had, the Ananei Kavod, the clouds of glory. What do you notice about the difference between the 3 things? If we didn't have man, Rabbi Yehuda, if we didn't have man in the desert, what are our chances of survival? As a Hatzara. If you don't have water, what are your chances of survival? Not good. You have man as the food. You had the water from Be'er Miriam. And the Ananei Kavod was dry cleaning and air conditioner. Now maybe some people from 5 towns wouldn't be able to survive without dry cleaning and air conditioning.
But Miriam died, I think, half a year before they went into Eretz Yisrael.
We have the whole Maaseh of the Mema Ripah. Moshe has to restore the waters. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening over there. So water and man, the Jewish it's nice, it's tough, it's good. But the 3 things is the only thing that's not mukhrach. You don't have to have it. So if you forgive me, and we're dependent on each other in some form or some way, so the relationship continues in anything that's mukhrach. But the extra stuff, the extra cookies you bring me in the little bag, right? The extra phone call, how you doing? That's not necessary. It's mutar. So what do we see? We see that the clouds of glory come back. It shows us not only has Hashem forgiven us, but there's more than that. There's ritzui. Now Hashem wants the relationship. Now the Gaon himself has a very nice remez to this idea. When we say Ata Bachartanu, right, we're actually going through all the Amim of the year. Ata Bachartanu Kol Amim is when Hashem chooses us. It chose us on Pesach. That was the Bechira. Ahavta Otanu. Where was the Chuppah? Torah. Veratzita Banu. Sukkot. Because not only did Hashem forgive us on Yom Kippur, but the clouds come back. He wanted the relationship. Why was there Ritzui 5 days later? Why do we have to wait 5 days? Says for us, right? Because when Hashem saw how excited we were to take the kapara and to do something with it, to run out, so excited about the Mishnah. It wasn't just looking at the Mishnah. We did it with such excitement, such zeal. Oh, that's a good word. We did it with so much zeal that even the leaders of the Jewish people were shocked. There was nothing left to give. We donated everything. We jumped into it with so much excitement that Hashem says, oh, if I'm going to forgive them, and that's how they'll respond, now I feel like I'm in a good place.
But it just depends on the Kabbalah. If they're well known for making this.
The second part of Sukkot. There are two cycles of Sukkot.
Oh, okay.
One has to do with the Chagim and the Hasifa, the crops. One has to do with Tshuva. That's the idea that we spoke about at the beginning. That the second cycle of putting Sukkot at the end of the Yomim Naraim, that's connected with Chet HaEgel and the fact that we were able to do Tshuva. And not only do Tshuva, that Hashem forgives us to the point that the clouds of glory come back. So now what do we see? We see that more than any other Chag, Sukkah is built on something completely different. When Hashem chooses us, it has nothing to do with us. Hashem says, right, He tells Moshe explicitly, I'm going to do things nobody's ever seen. I'm going to reveal my highest expression of myself, the Yud Kei Vav Kei. You're going out of Egypt, the world is going to learn what Hashem is in that revelation. Torah, the whole of creation, was built on the condition that Torah is going to be given. It has nothing to do with us. The only Chag that has to do with us is Sukkot, because it's all about the Ritzui. Where did the Ritzui come from? That when Hashem forgave us, we didn't become passive and say, oh, now we're forgiven. It's over, right? No, we became active with the Ritzui. I'll share, I just saw it this year, one of my Rebbeim, Rabbi Bernstein, he asked a very interesting question, that you see that there's a bunch of times that the Kohen Gadol, before he does the avodah, he has to wash his hands and feet every time he changes his garments. So there's 1, washing hands and feet before he starts. Then there's 8, 4 changing of the garments, 1 before, 1 after. And then when he finishes everything, he washes his hands and feet and goes home. As for Bernstein, what's the last one for? He's done with the avodah. He's not doing a service in the Beis HaMikdash anymore. He's going home. You're going home. What do you care? Why do you have to wash your hands and feet? So he gave an answer that his father, Rav Isaac Bernstein Zechatai Kavacha, told him in the name of Rav Kook that if you think that after Yom Kippur, the whole point is, okay, I'm done, time to go home, you miss the whole point of Yom Kippur. That's when the real avodah begins. Hashem forgave you. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with the kapara, with the forgiveness Hashem gave you? If you think it's over, you missed the boat. It's just beginning. So now we can go back and understand why it's so important on Sukkot that we have a siman klala. The Tosfos says, why does rain have to be able to come into my sukkah? So let's go back to our mashal in the Mishnah. The mashal says that the servant comes into the king to water down his wine, and the king spills it in his face. What does the mashal have to do with sukkahs? Just because there's water? The mashal should be, I came to sit in the king's chatzer, in his courtyard, and he said, go away. That should be the mashal, right? I'm sitting in the sukkah, Hashem has rain come down, I can't sit, I have to go. What does it have to do with serving the water and having it thrown back in my face? Right? So the Gaon also explains this mashal, not in the same place. The Gaon in his Chidushim, or that's brought down as Chidushim of the Gaon, explains as follows. What's the water and what's the wine? Right? The water is rachamim. It's mercy. And wine, as we know, the red, it's din. Right? Wine is din. You have to squeeze the grapes to get the wine out. Right? So what are we doing? We're coming to Hashem and we're saying, Hashem, we want you to water down the din. We're weak, we're frail, we're fragile, we can't take so much din. So we're beseeching you, please water down the din. We want to give Hashem the water. Right? That's what the Gaon says. And if Hashem is not pleased with us, he throws the water back. Now, let's flesh out the Gaon completely. The mashal is about a servant and his master. So if we're talking about the Jewish people as servants, we're talking about the avodas Hashem, right? How are we serving Hashem? We're serving Hashem by bringing him rachamim, by bringing him mercy. Where do we have storehouses of rachamim? Where do we have mercy from? You and I have mercy that we could bring to Hashem and say, Hashem, please add this mercy into your din? Yes. You know where we have it from? From Yom Kippur, when Hashem gave it to us. Hashem said, according to the din, you don't deserve to be forgiven. But we have a process called tshuva, where if you're going to change your ways and you're going to do something right, I'm happy to forgive you, moving forward. So Hashem gives us His mercy. So we're doing the avodah, and we're doing it with the mercy that Hashem has given to us.
Very fresh mercy.
Very, very fresh mercy. And what does Sukkot depend on? Ritzui. Hashem has to believe us that genuinely we're taking the mercy He gave us, and we're not just going to go, oh, okay, Hashem forgave me, I can relax, put up my feet, preseason basketball is coming up, right? No, what are you doing with the mercy that Hashem gave you? You're coming back to Hashem in your avodah. With all the mercy they just gave you and all the mitzvot that you do, how are you acting? So if you're not acting correctly and there's no ritzui, so now the rain comes and you have to leave. The rain's getting splashed back at you. What does it mean that the rain's getting splashed back at you? So we said that rain is mercy, right? Rain represents mercy. So how could it be that through mercy you have to leave the sukkah? Because you were mikalkel, the mercy that you got. You're sitting, you're eating your mikvah, you're eating your soup, it's supposed to sustain you, right? Your relationship with Hashem. And if you're not using it properly, so now the mercy that Hashem gave you is actually ruining you. The mercy Hashem gave you isn't isn't sustaining you, it's destroying you. So the rain comes into the sukkah, it ruins the food, that's when you know it's time to leave. Hashem, it says that Hashem splashes the ketone back into his face. The idea of panim, as we know, is panim al panim, right? However we show our face to Hashem, that's how he shows it back. Sukkot isn't just the chag that ends the kapara because, now it's over and time to have fun, time to have a party. It's the chag where we get to look at our own reflection and Hashem gets to show us, I've given you rachamim, what are you doing? Are you using it to serve it properly? Are you not using it to serve it properly? And when we don't use it to serve it properly, Hashem shows us that the mercy He's given us is actually ruining us as opposed to sustaining us. So, from the concept of Antwerp and Schach, we open up the whole sugya. See, there's a lot of ideas about Schach. You have to be able to be stars. You have to be able to have rain come in. Why? Even though, without getting into the specific halachas, but Shkach.
Hi folks, it's David Ostreicher here in sunny Carmiel in the Galilee of Israel. It's a beautiful day here, and it's Erev. Hi folks, it's David Ostreicher here in sunny Carmiel in the Galilee of Israel. It's a beautiful day here, and it's Erev Sukkot, which means that tonight we might sleep in the sukkah behind me, which would be very exciting. My first time doing so since we came here. It's a very wonderful time. We had an inspiring Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah followed by Yom Kippur, and we all felt at the end of it that our ruling in the court above as well as the court below was positive for the coming year, and we're all looking forward to it with great anticipation. And now, having finished with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the days of judgment, we enter into the days of joy and happiness, the time of the Sukkah. There's a connection between the two. I'm going to talk more about the Sukkah with you during Chol Moed, the days in between. But I do want to give you an idea that I heard from Rabbi Jonathan Reiser last night, and it's on KosherTube as well, in much more detail. In the avoda, the service of the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, at different points in the service, he's changing clothes, and from the garments that he goes into the Holy of Holies and the garments that he goes to the people and the holies. And during each of those changes, he immerses in the mikveh of purification, the waters of Mayim Chaim, the living waters of purification. And there's a question asked, which frankly I never asked before, but last night the question was asked and answered, and it's a great lesson for the holiday coming up. What are the connections between Yom Kippur, 5 days later, Sukkot? And there's a hint in these immersions, in this time in the mikveh. The last time that the Kohen Gadol goes to the mikveh is between the conclusion of the service and when he changes into his own clothes. He takes off the clothes of the high priest. He changes into his, street clothes, basically, and he goes home. But in between, he goes to the mikveh. Well, frankly, it doesn't really make that much sense. Why? Because you go to the mikveh to raise your level of purification in order to do the service of God. He's finished. He's going home. They're going to break the fast, and the Kohen, Mrs. Kohen Gadol and the little Kohen Gadolim, are all going to be sitting around the table, and they're going to, like other people, move on. And does he want to remove some of the holiness that was in the Beis Hamikdash before he goes home? Is that why he's immersing? The answer is no. Sukkot is the anniversary of, or the celebration of, two kinds of huts. One is like the hut you see behind me that the Jews lived in the 40 years in the Midbar. And the other was called the Ananei Kavod, the clouds of glory. Clouds of glory was God's moving hut that surrounded the Jews on all sides, smoothed out the road for them, air conditioned the environment in the desert. Their clothes didn't wear out. There was a dry cleaner for them. They had food underneath it. They had water underneath it. And it was a protection. As long as they had it, it was a protection. But the clouds of glory disappeared after the sin of the golden calf. And then the Jews were exposed and in a much more weakened position. And what happened? Moshe went back up to Sinai. He was there for another 40 days, the third 40 days, right? And when he came down with a second set of tablets and an indication that our tshuva, our desire to straighten our path, had been accepted by God. And what day was this? This day was the 10th day of Tishrei, Yom Kippur, a day of mercy, a day of rachamim, a day of acceptance of our regrets for the golden calf and our determination to move on. A day that not only did we understand our regrets were accepted, but we understood something else, that acceptance is not just a let's move on, we dodged the bullet. No, acceptance was a new opportunity to invigorate our commitment to God. How did we do it? It was the day that we began to build the Beis Hamikdash, to build the Mishkan in the desert, the home for God, so to speak, or the meeting place for God with Moshe and the Jewish people. And we did it with such a zealous desire that in 2 days, all of the materials, the gold, the silver, the fabrics, everything you can imagine, was donated by the people, anxious to say, we are back. We not only are we back, but we're back with more vigor, more commitment than we left. And we appreciate getting this chance. During this time, there was a 5-day period where they prepared themselves and then began to build the Mishkan. And it's as though a God in heaven looked and said, my children are building a home for me. They're back. I've given them a second chance, and they've grabbed it, and they're running with it. They're making the most of it. And they're making it clear that whatever they can give to it, they will give to it. And I'm giving back them the clouds of protection, the Ananei Kavod. And on the 5th day, the 15th day of the month, 5 days after Yom Kippur, the Ananei Kavod came back, and this is actually, according to the Vilna Gaon and others, why we celebrate Sukkot, which actually went on all year long, living in Sukkot. Why we celebrate Sukkot on this day, on the 15th day of Tishrei. There's more. And this comes back to the question of the Kohen Gadol. What was he doing, immersing himself before he went home? What did he bring, what quality did he bring into the world during the both solemn and exciting Yom Kippur? The quality he brought in is in the prayer we repeat over and over and over. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. A king rules justly. A father doesn't rule justly. He rules with kindness. He rules with mercy, with rachamim. And this is in fact the quality of Yom Kippur. And the Kohen Gadol is the conductor of the orchestra on this day. And the tune he's playing is Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. And he is bringing it down, God's mercy into this world. Right? He's saying, yes, you sinned with the golden calf. But I'm going to rule mercifully and say, you want another chance? You have another chance. And this was a day for the whole world to bring mercy into the world. Now, here's the question. What was he doing on the last immersion? And this is very important to understand as you go into your sukkah. We could go into our sukkah saying, yes, we won the case in court. You know, it's great. We dodged the bullet. Everything's good. Let's say l'chaim. And we should. There's nothing wrong with it. But beyond that, we should say, I have a holiness that is beyond the Beis Hamikdash, that was brought into this world on Yom Kippur. And now the question is, what will I do? It's not my holiness. It's the holiness of God. It's the mercy of God brought into this world. So the question is now, as Yom Kippur is ending and Sukkot is beginning, what do I do with God's rachamim, with God's mercy that surrounded us and came to us